All right, welcome back, you guys, for another story. We are still going to continue on with our Tall Tales text set. So today's book is called Dona Flor. Okay, this book is a tall tale about a giant woman with a great big heart. So yesterday's story was about a giant man, and today we're going to get to read about a giant woman. So this book was written by Pat Mora, and our illustrations are by a man named Raul Colon. This book won several awards. You see it won the Pura Pelebre Award, the Pura Pelebre Honor, and a Golden Kite Award. So you know this book is going to be good. How exciting, right? All right, so the people in this story have a big problem, okay, and a big friend, which is more than likely going to be our main character. It's obviously Dona Flor, right? So, what do you remember about Tall Tales? What did we talk about yesterday? Think about at least one thing. Yeah, definitely exaggerated, definitely something that cannot happen. And these are stories that have been passed on for generations and generations, right? Okay, so what does the title suggest about the setting of this story? Dona Flor, a tale about a giant woman with a great big heart. Think about that. Let's go ahead and find out. Okay. Dona Flor, a tale about a giant woman with a great big heart. Every winter morning, when the sun opened one eye, Dona Flor grabbed a handful of snow from the top of a nearby mountain. Brr, she said, rubbing the snow on her face to wake up. Long, long ago, when Flor was a baby, her mother sang to her in a voice sweet as river music. When Flor's mother sang to her, corn plants, they grew tall as trees, and when she sang to her baby, her sweet flower, well, Flor, grew and grew too. So let me read the first sentence again. What clues do we get right from the beginning about the kind of story this will be? Okay. Every winter morning when the sun opened one eye, Dona Flor grabbed a handful of snow from the top of a nearby mountain. Think about that for a second. What kind of story do we already know it's going to be? Because does the sun have eyes? No. Okay, so um, what do you think about the kind of language the author is using? Trying to get you to think here, right? Okay, let's move on. And there's a special word. Remember, it's if the author is using words that have human body parts, and it said the eye of the sun, right? What was that called? Do you remember that name, that word? It's personification. Remember, it has person in it? Yeah, the author's using personification to help us kind of get a visual picture of what's going on here. All right. Some children laughed at her because she was different. Mira, look, Bigfoot, they called when she walked by. Flor talks funny, they whispered, because Flor spoke to butterflies and grasshoppers. She spoke every language, even Rattler. But soon, Flor's friends and neighbors asked her for help. Children, late for school, asked, por favor, Flor, could you give us a ride? She took just one of her giant steps and was at the school door. Of course, the escuela, shook and the windows rattled. So there she is, taking them to school when they were late. She's huge, isn't she? It's a big giant. Okay. When Flor finally stopped growing, she built her own house, una casa big as a mountain and open as a canyon. She scooped a handful of dirt and made herself a valley for mixing clay, straw, and water. She added some estrellas. The stars made the adobe shine. When she worked, Flor sang and birds came and built nests in her hair. Flor wanted everyone to feel at home in her house. Mi casa es su casa, she said to people and animals and plants, so they knew they were always welcome. Everyone called her Dona Flor because they respected her. So Flor tells the neighbors that Spanish saying, mi casa es su casa, that means my home or my house is your house. So she was just welcoming them in. No one needs an alarm clock in Doña Flor's pueblo. When her hands, wide as plates, started patting tortillas, everyone in the village woke up. So her neighbors would have plenty to eat. She stacked her tortillas on the huge rock table in front of her house. Flor's tortillas were the biggest, bestest tortillas in the whole wide world. People used the extra ones as roofs. The houses smelled corn good when the sun was hot. In the summer, the children floated around on the pond on tortilla rafts. Look at their tortilla raft. That's funny. That just kind of shows you, like, gives you a perspective of how huge she was. There she is right there. One warm spring day, while a family of lizards swept her house, Doña Flor brought out her stacks of fresh tortillas. Nobody came. Hmm, thought Flor. She started knocking on doors and calling to her neighbors. ¿Qué pasa? What's the matter? She asked, bending down to peer into their small doors to see where they were hiding. El Puma, they whispered. The children had heard a huge mountain lion circling the village. Listen, Flor listened, and sure enough, she heard a terrible roar. Doña Flor and her animal friends went out looking for the huge gato, but they couldn't find it. That night, she carried her tired friends and coyotes and rabbits back home. But just as she started to tuck them in and read them a good night story, they all heard, Roar! Where is that darn cat? Asked Flor. But the scared animals were shaking and shivering under their sheets. She gave each a giant kiss. Smack! The sound echoed and woke the grumpy wind, and stormed up and down the hill, a grumbling and a growling. That night the wind got so angry that he blew the trees and houses first to the left and then to the right, again to the left and then to the right. Now, Doña Flor liked her sleep, so she wasn't smiling when she heard the wind spinning around and around the village. Together, the wind and the giant cat roared all night, and nobody got much sleep. As the sun rose, Flor's neighbors, shaking at the commotion, peered out their windows. Tired looking Flor was giving that wind a big hug to quiet him down. Then she started her morning chores. So, what do you notice about this illustration? What does it make you think about Flor? And why do you think this? I think that she's friendly with anyone and everyone. Like, even though she didn't like what the wind was doing, it made me feel like, oh, she's kind and she's just trying to even calm the wind that was supposedly angry at that moment. Okay, next photo. Dona Flor had work to do, but first she looked around the village. Where were her neighbors? Then she heard roar, roar. Flor stomped off to find the puma that was bothering her amigos. Exhausted by afternoon, Dona Flor still hadn't found the cat, so she sat outside the library for a rest. She was too big to fit inside, so she just reached into the window for books. You see, Flor was probably the fastest reader ever. Why she could read the whole encyclopedia? Why she could read the whole encyclopedia in 5 minutes? She liked to sit in the shade and read stories and poems, nice and slow, to the children and animals that climbed all over her soft body. Today she called, and finally the children came, but they were scared. Look at that tiny book she's reading. Okay. What can I do to cheer my friends up? Wondered Flor as she faces, saw their frightened faces. She thought and thought. Now, Flor knew that her village needed un rio, a river. So, to make her neighbors happy, Doña Flor scratched a new riverbed with her thumb. When the water trickled down the stones for the first time, Flor called out, "Just listen to that! Isn't that the prettiest sound you've ever heard?" She smiled, and her smile was about as big as her tortillas, but today her neighbors could barely smile back. They were too worried about the mountain lion. And sure enough, suddenly there was a terrible roar, roar. "That's it," thought Doña Flor, and again she stomped off to look for the giant puma, but she still couldn't find him. She went home to think and work in her garden. It was like a small forest on the edge of the pueblo, a tangle of poppies, morning glories, roses, luscious tomatoes, and chiles. Um, Whatever she planted grew so fast you could hear the roots spreading at night. Her neighbors used the sunflowers as bright yellow umbrellas. She gave the school band her hollyhocks to use as trumpets. The music smelled like spring. "My plants grow that big because I sing to them like my mother did," Doña Flor told the children when they came three at a time to carry back an ear of corn. But today, the children ran home when they heard roar. The sound rattled at the plates of the pueblo. Flor's neighbors' teeth started rattling too. "Where is that big monster gato?" Doña Flor wondered. The smell of roses helped Flor think, so she went inside and took a long, hot bubble bath. Everyone knew Doña Flor was thinking when bubbles that smelled like roses began to rise from her chimney. "I know," thought Flor. "I'll go to my animal friends for help." She stomped off again and started asking because remember, she spoke every language, even Rattler. "Go quietly to the tallest mesa," said the deer. "Vaya silencio saamente a la más alta," hissed the snake. "Go quietly to the tallest mesa," whispered the rabbits. Why do you think the author gave Flor the ability to talk to every kind of animal? What does it reveal about her as a person? And what do you think Flor will do once she finds the giant puma? What makes you think that? I personally think that she's trying to find the puma to calm it down so that it's not scaring people. Um, I don't think she's wanting to hurt it because has she hurt anything so far? No. She was even nice to the wind that was annoying her, right? So let's see what happens. Knowing that animals are mighty smart, Doña Flor followed their advice. She walked very, very softly up the tallest mesa. She looked around carefully for the giant cat. Then, right near her, she heard Roar! Roar! Flor jumped so high she bumped into the sun and gave him a black eye. Flor looked around. All she saw was the back of a cute little puma. She watched him very quietly. Dona Flor began to tiptoe toward the puma when all of a sudden he roared into a long, hollow log. The sound became a huge roar that echoed down into the valley. So look what's making his voice sound so loud. It's not really him, is it? It's that big log. So let's see what she does. Now that the little puma thought the loud sound was so funny that he rolled on his back and started laughing and laughing until he saw Dona Flor. Aha, thought Flor. Are you the Chico who's causing all the trouble? She asked. The little puma tried to look very fierce. His eyes sizzled with angry sparks. He opened his mouth wide and his teeth glinted. He roared his meanest roar. Roar! He growled, but without the log, the growl wasn't really very fierce. Dona Flor just smiled at that brave cat and said, "Why, you're just a kitten to me, Pumito." And she bent down and scratched that puma behind his ears. And she whispered to him in cat talk until that cat began to purr and purr. Pumito began to lick Flor's face and his with his wet tongue. So, how is the puma different from what you expected? And what do you think the puma represents in this story? Got to think a little deeper on that one. Okay. Suddenly, Flor heard a new noise. Doña Flor, ¿dónde estás? Where are you? Called her worried neighbors. Even though they were frightened, they had all come holding hands, looking for her. Meet mi new amigo, said Doña Flor, smiling at at her thoughtful neighbors. That evening, Flor plucked a star the way she always did and plunked it on the tallest tree so her friends in the pueblo could find their way home. She plucked una estrella to put above her door, too. Even the stars could hear Doña Flor humming. So they're all her friends, her neighbors that came by. Flor liked a fresh bed, so she reached up and filled her arms with clouds, smelling of flowery breezes. She shaped the clouds into a soft, deep bed and into hills of puffy pillows. Mmm, said Flor as she snuggled in the clouds. Tonight I'm very tired after my adventure with the giant cat, right, Pumito? Chuckled Doña Flor. All the animals snuggled down with her, and Pumito stretched out over her big toes. There she is right there. Or that's Pumito. Here's another picture of him. Tiny little Pumito. All right. That's the end of our story for today, you guys. Thank you guys for listening. This is another fantastic tall tale, and I hope you enjoyed it. All right, guys. Bye.